Hi, I'm Oz Clark. Welcome to the Microsoft Wine Guide. I want to show you the glittering showcase of wines the world contains today. And it's a world that's open to all of us. It's no longer necessary to be well-traveled or rich or well-connected to catch a glimpse of the glorious flavors wine is capable of. There's never been a better time to be a wine drinker. There's never been more good wine around to be tried, and it's never been as affordable as it is today. So please, use our guide to expand your experiences and horizons, and your pleasures, in this, the golden age of wine. If you are going to get the best out of a bottle of wine, there are a few simple procedures worth following. I'm going to show you the most important of these. And there are also a few guidelines worth following if you're tasting wine. In this section, I'm going to show you my approach, and I'm also going to take you on a tour of the classic wine styles, traditional and modern. Having the right kind of wine glass does add to your enjoyment of wine. The kind of glass that flatters, say, champagne may not do much at all for a fine red Bordeaux. Wine does taste better out of the right glasses. It's not my imagination, it really does. But I would hate you ever to feel inhibited about opening a bottle of wine just because you didn't have the right type of glass to hand. I mean, I'll drink vintage champagne out of a tin mug if that's all there is. It may not be correct, but wine is supposed to be fun before it's correct. If you want, you can get by with just two different sorts of wine glass. The classic red, which is fine for all sorts of table wine and port and sherry, and the champagne flute. In fact, if I was starting out learning about wine now, that's what I'd use. Port is a strong, sweet wine and is drunk in small measures. The classic port glass has a relatively modest capacity, but that doesn't stop you refilling it each time the decanter comes round. This elegant glass, known in Spain as a copita, is the traditional glass for sherry. Dry sherry is generally drunk chilled. This is the classic red wine glass, but will be good for any sort of wine. It's tulip-shaped and it's plain, with no cutting or decoration, because that only distracts you from the wine. The bowl is big enough to fill half full, and you still get a decent glassful. And it's generous enough to be able to swirl the wine about a bit to admire the colour and the bouquet. The bowl of a classic white wine glass is smaller than that of a red wine glass. White wine doesn't need to breathe as much, and its bouquet doesn't develop as dramatically. The great joy of champagne is the bubbles. This narrow champagne flute preserves the bubbles in the wine and keeps it fizzy longer. Red Burgundy releases its aromas very quickly after the bottle is opened. This glass, with its wider bowl and more tapering sides, maximizes the development of the wine's perfume. Red Bordeaux needs time to reveal its full complexities of bouquet and flavor. This large glass, with a fairly wide bowl and tapering sides, allows maximum contact with air to allow the wine to develop. All wine should be stored on its side. That's to stop the cork drying out. Some wine develops sediment. Any mature red wine of, say, 10 years old will probably develop sediment. So what you do is take the wine gently out and stand it upright for 24 hours before you drink it, letting the sediment drop gently to the bottom of the bottle. I've lit a candle, and the reason for that is I want some light which can shine through the neck or the shoulder of the bottle as I start pouring this wine into a jug or a decanter. Now what I hope is going to happen is that I'm going to use one gentle movement all the way through. Any sudden movements and the sediment will end up in the body of the wine all over again. But I'm watching to see when a little arrowhead of sediment starts to creep up the bottle towards the shoulder or the neck, because that's the sediment coming up the bottle, Here it comes. I can just see it coming up now, just coming into the shoulder. And there it is in the neck. I stop that. The sediment all stays in the bottle and all the clear wine is in the decanter. White wines and rosé wines are best chilled. Now, with something like a Chardonnay, I'd give it an hour in the refrigerator. A Sauvignon, a Riesling, a rosé wine, about 2 hours or more. And for older wines, don't over-chill them. 1 hour in the refrigerator is quite enough. Young red wines can be treated in a fairly cavalier kind of way. A light, fruity red wine can even be chilled for an hour. Full-bodied red wines are usually better at a cool room temperature. This is the basic corkscrew design, and the one thing all corkscrews must have is a generous helix, one that you can slide a matchstick up and down like that. That will stop the corkscrew tearing the heart out of the cork. So what you do with this is you put the corkscrew into the center of the cork like that, you give it a good twist around until it's gone right into the cork, and then you simply pull it out. Capsules are usually made of lead, tin or plastic. Remove the top by cutting around the rim with a capsule or foil cutter or with a knife and flipping it off. Wipe the top with a wet cloth. This is particularly important if it's a lead capsule. So I'm going to pour some wine. Now, the whole point about this is pour it gently and pour less than half a glass so that you've got room to swirl it around if you want. What you don't want to do is pour it like mad and pour it more than half full because everything goes all over the place and you make an awful mess in the carpet. This is a popular corkscrew called the waiter's friend. Here you twist the corkscrew into the cork, then you put the clasp against the rim of the bottle, but you hold it tightly and ease the cork out. Sometimes the cork breaks off halfway down the neck of the bottle. Well, what you have to do, I'm afraid, is very gently push the cork into the wine. Do it gently so that the wine doesn't splash out. It's not particularly pretty, but it doesn't affect the flavour of the wine. And it also means that when you pour the wine, be careful for the very first pour so that it doesn't shoot out of the bottle. But I have got a device called a butler's friend which you can use to save that cork. Now what you do here is put these 3 prongs into the bottle. You push them down like that, and then you waggle them around to get hold of the cork. Inside the prongs, you push the ring down like that and pull it out. And there you've got it. This is the screw pull, one of the most user-friendly of all corkscrews because there's just no effort involved. You just turn the corkscrew into the cork and then you keep on turning and the cork just comes out of the bottle. Here's a cork I've been unable to budge with an ordinary corkscrew. So what I'm going to do is use the thief. Now, you put the longer side of this down one side of the cork, the shorter side down the other side, and wiggle it down like that. Then you twist it and pull it out in one motion. What it also may be useful for is when you have old bottles of wine with very fragile corks. Opening sparkling wine isn't actually very difficult, but the one thing you must remember is not to let the cork fly out because you could actually hurt someone. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to locate the ring. There's a wire ring in there. I'm going to pull it out like that, and then I'm going to get this gold foil around here, take it off like this. Now from now on I'm going to put my finger over the top there to avoid the actual cork coming out and undo this wire cage like that. And remove the wire cage, loosen it up like this, and hold the bottle and gradually twist that cork and twist the bottle at an angle which will mean that it's less likely to fizz out And gradually I can feel the pressure building up against my hand. The cork is slowly easing out, and there it is. The best way to do this is to tilt the glass like this and then pour the wine down the side of the glass. What happens then is that the bubbles actually stay in the wine rather than spilling all over the place. And you certainly don't want to do this, because what happens if you pour the wine like that is, whoops, here we go. Exactly, it goes all over the table and you lose most of the fizz. And don't use these coupes, these champagne coupes, because what you get then is a brief flaring of bubbles and you're left then with still wine. One fail-safe method of getting the champagne cork out without it shooting out and hurting anybody is to put a cloth over the top of the bottle. Now I've removed the foil from the top. Now what I'm doing is twisting the wire cage off underneath there, holding the wire cage and the cork and easing both of them out at the same time. The first thing you do when you're tasting wine is to look at it. Now hold the glass by the stem and get something white so that you can look at the colour against a white background. You can see whether the wine's clear or hazy, and you can get some clues as to the character of the wine. The next thing to do after you've looked at the wine is to smell the wine. Now, I'm swirling the wine around in the glass, and the reason for that is to push the aromas from the surface of the wine right up to the top of the glass. It's just like if you smell a rose in the garden. You smell the rose, and it's a nice smell, but take a couple of petals off the rose and crunch them in your hand, and then smell them, and it's a much, much more powerful aroma. That's exactly what I'm doing with the wine. And when you smell it, take note of your first impressions, and they're going to give you lots of clues as to what the wine is finally going to taste like. Now I'm ready to taste the wine. What I've just done there is put the wine in my mouth and breathed through it so the air can release flavours in the wine. Then I've swallowed it, and then I've breathed out through my nose. And the reason for that is the tongue itself only registers sweetness, sourness, bitterness, and salt. All aromas, flavours, and perfumes are registered and transferred to the brain from the nasal cavity. Now register your first impressions and use words that mean something to you. I've looked at the wine, I've smelt the wine, I've tasted the wine. Now I'm going to take a moment to consider all the elements and the flavours together. Are they all in balance? Is the combination pleasing? Depending on the context, this may also be the time to write down some of my impressions. This is the way I'm going to build up my personal vocabulary of tasting descriptions for future reference. As well as making notes about the wines they taste, many people like to give each wine a score. I have mixed feelings about scoring wines. A simple numerical score can't really convey the pleasure a wine gives. But I confess that I do it myself at professional tastings. I find it a good discipline for forcing me to come to an overall assessment, but I don't publish my marks, and you won't find scores in the wine encyclopedia here. If you're going to score, you should mark the appearance, the bouquet, and the taste. Whether you are scoring out of 10, 20, or 100, I suggest you allocate the following percentages. 10% to appearance. This is the least important, and to be honest, if you wanted to add this 10% to bouquet, I wouldn't object. 30% to bouquet. Much of the beauty and fascination of old wines in particular is conveyed in the bouquet. 60% to taste. This is what it's all about, the total sensation when you taste and indeed drink the wine, and this should be awarded the greatest percentage of the marks. Add all these up and see whether the marks tally with the overall impression of quality and pleasure that the wine gave you. The appearance of the wine can give me important clues as to the character of the wine. White wines can range in colour from a pale, almost greeny white to a full, rich gold. Now the pale greeny white ones are likely to have a tangy flavour, a sharper, a greener flavour, whereas the gold ones are likely to taste more golden, richer, rounder, riper. The pale ones will come from cool areas of the world in general, whereas the golden ones will come from warmer areas where the grapes ripen more. Now this wine here is a Riesling from the Mosel Valley in Germany. That's about as cool as you can get to make great wines, and this one has a wonderfully sharp, almost lime juice kind of quality and a slaty dryness to it. This one here comes from the Hunter Valley in Australia. It's a Chardonnay, and it's rich, it's round, it's almost syrupy in its tropical fruit ripeness. The colour of a wine is a major clue to its age, and the age of a wine is a major clue to its flavour. This wine here is a young Beaujolais Nouveau, and it's got a bright, fresh, pinky red kind of colour, and the flavour is going to be all youthful vibrancy, all freshness. It's like fruit just picked off the bush. Now this wine here is a 9-year-old Reserva wine from Rioja in Spain. The red has lost all its fresh youthfulness. It's become bricky red, it's become orangey brown, and the flavour mature, almost over mature, and the fruit becoming positively stewed. I drink wine for the pleasure it gives me, and there are a number of key elements which will contribute to this. Wine doesn't exist without alcohol. The sugar in the grape juice is converted by yeast into alcohol, and at the same time, the flavour of the grape juice is completely transformed. Now, in a cool area, the sun may only produce enough sugar to give a wine of, say, 7%. In a hotter area, the wine may naturally reach 14%. Now, these wines are neither better nor worse, but the difference in alcoholic degree dramatically changes the wine's character. All wines fall somewhere in the range from bone dry to obviously sweet. This depends on how much sugar, if any, has been left in the wine after fermentation. This relative dryness or sweetness is an important element of style, but it doesn't in itself denote a wine of greater or lesser quality. Describing the flavour of a wine is a very personal thing, so use taste descriptions that mean something to you. I've got a Cabernet Sauvignon here. This is from the Napa Valley in California. It smells of mint and blackcurrant. Tastes of mint and blackcurrant too. And there's also a sort of black cherry kind of fruit there, and there's a little hint of cigar box, cedarwood, just beginning to come through, which will get stronger and stronger as the wine gets older. Here's a Crozes Hermitage. That's made from the Syrah grape, or the Shiraz grape, in the northern Rhône in France. This one smells very smoky. Yep, it tastes smoky, but there's a raspberry kind of fruit, and there's a sort of chocolate creaminess there as well. A Valpolicella from Italy. Well, this one straight away has a sweet-sour quality to it, sort of sweet-sour cherries. Yeah, and there's something like wood bark, a rather bitter wood bark quality, and right at the back, a rather overripe raisin quality to it. This wine is a Viognier. That's the grape variety, and the wine is grown in the south of France. Oh, delicious. It's got a smell of marshmallows and apricots about it. The marshmallows and apricots are absolutely gorgeous. And there's also a slight cinnamon spice there, and then an acidity like scratching the zest off a lemon. This one is a Riesling from Washington State in the USA. This one smells of limes. It's quite sweet, but there's a strong bite of lime juice about it, and then a rather syrupy, rather peachy quality. The single most important contribution to the flavour of a wine comes from the grape variety from which it is made. Just as each variety of apple has its own distinct flavour, so each variety of grape has its own distinct flavour. And it's one of the glories of modern wine that our winemakers are able to draw out the very essence of each different variety. And that's what we mean by fruit. Botrytis, or noble rot, is a fungus that affects just a few vineyards all around the world, notably in Sauternes in France. It shrivels the grapes and it intensifies the sugar, and all the great sweet wines of the world are made from grapes affected by botrytis. I've got a Sauternes here from an excellent year. What do I get? A very pineapple-y fruit, butterscotchy, a sort of peach syrup, lanolin kind of texture. It's a flavour as well as a texture, and it's quite unique. Many wines nowadays are matured or even fermented in small oak barrels. Now I've got a California Chardonnay here, which has the unmistakable flavours of having spent some time maturing in a new oak barrel. It's got a creamy, buttery, vanilla flavour to it, and there's a small touch of cinnamon spice as well. Now those are the classic flavours of oak maturing for a red wine as well as for a white. All good ripe fruit that we eat must retain some acidity, be it an apple, a peach, a plum, a blackcurrant. That's the same with wine. All white wine and all red wine must have some acidity to keep its flavours fresh. Now I've got a glass of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc here. New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is famous for its acidity. Immediately, the acidity is puckering up my mouth, it's racing over my palate, and it's really waking me up. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. Tannin is a crucial component in the aging potential of red wine. Now, tannin occurs naturally in the skins of red grapes. When you eat a red grape, think how bitter that skin is. It's the same thing as when you drink strong tea. It's the tannin which is furring up your mouth. Now, the wonderful thing is tannin is a natural preservative. Now, this wine here is a Barolo wine, 5 years old, from northern Italy. As soon as I have it in my mouth, I get a bitter, a salt on my gums. Now, that's not very pleasant now, but it's going to allow this wine to age very, very gently for the next 10 to 20 years. Unfortunately, some wines do have faults. There are 4 common faults. Too much contact with air can harm a wine. This can happen in the fermentation tank, in the barrel, or in the bottle. In a red wine, it manifests itself as a kind of mushroom prune flavour. In a white wine, it starts with a raisiny flatness and can go on to a drab, bad sherry kind of flavour. And in either case, red or white wine, the colour tends to go brown. Classic oxidised flavour. Dead. This doesn't mean that bits of cork have crumbled into your wine. That's annoying, but perfectly harmless, and it doesn't mean your wine is corked. Occasionally, however, during the manufacturing process, the cork can become infected, and this infection imparts a peculiarly pungent flavour when the cork comes in contact with the wine. I can best describe it as dank, mouldy old socks. Mouldy socks? No, thanks. Sulphur is an important antioxidant used in winemaking, but applied sloppily, it can ruin the taste of a wine. Now, it may manifest itself as the acrid stench of a recently struck match, or it may be a dank, sourness and taste of mothballs in the heart of the wine. Dankness and mothballs. Sulphur. Wine begins to go vinegary when acetic bacteria attack it either in the fermentation tank or as a result of infection in the storage barrels. Oh, I'm certainly not going to put that in my mouth. Vinegar. This is a non-vintage champagne from one of the major champagne houses in France. Now champagne, well, it's a sparkling wine. It comes from the northern part of France only, and it's made from the Pinot Noir, the Chardonnay, and the Pinot Meunier grapes. But that's not quite the point. The whole thing about champagne is celebration. The whole thing about champagne is making you feel good. It's one of those wines where the effect is actually as important as the flavour. So what have we got? Well, lots of nice small bubbles running up the glass. That's good. I like that. Because the bubbles should be small, because if they're small, it means they've held in the wine much better, and if they've been held in the wine, they're going to explode in your mouth. The colour's nice. It's a nice green colour with a little bit of gold just coming, showing a little bit of maturity. This is a non-vintage champagne from one of the major champagne houses in France. Now champagne, well, it's a sparkling wine. It comes from the northern part of France only, and it's made from the Pinot Noir, the Chardonnay, and the Pinot Meunier grapes. But that's not quite the point. The whole thing about champagne is celebration. The whole thing about champagne is making you feel good. It's one of those wines where the effect is actually as important as the flavour. So what have we got? Well, lots of nice small bubbles running up the glass. That's good. I like that. Because the bubbles should be small, because if they're small, it means they've held in the wine much better, and if they've been held in the wine, they're going to explode in your mouth. The colour's nice. It's a nice green colour with a little bit of gold just coming, showing a little bit of maturity. Smells good. I mean, it's quite sharp, the smell. I mean, it's quite sort of green apple sharpness, but there's around that sharpness a sort of rather biscuity, toffee-ish quality. And this is because the wine has been in contact with yeast, and yeast has a nice creamy quality. When the wine is lying in its bottle, getting its bubbles, it is in contact with the yeast which actually created the fermentation in the first place. The creamy flavour in champagne is the yeast, and I want that. The bubbles. That's what's good about champagne. Those bubbles run up and down in your mouth. They foam in your mouth. Now the flavour is good. It's quite acid, but then the grapes that champagne is made from are acid. But the acidity is tempered by a roundness, a slight toffee gentleness. Very nice example of champagne. This is an Australian sparkling wine. It's made from the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay grapes, and it's made by the champagne method. But remember, Australia is a warm country, and it's very, very different from the cold north of France where champagne itself comes from. So let's look at it. Well, there's a lovely small bubble running up the side of the glass, and see that beautiful foam around the top. That's what the champagne method does for you. The champagne method keeps the bubbles small and tight in the wine, so that when they do release, they release in your mouth. Smells very good. Now champagne would have a rather sharper smell than this. This has a rounder, gentler, riper smell because it comes from riper grapes. The bubbles foam in my mouth. I love that, because I really do drink sparkling wine for the effect of the bubbles as much as the flavour. As it happens, the flavour's very good. It's soft, softer than a champagne would be. It's round, rather appley, a rather gentle yeasty creaminess. Very nice sparkling wine. This is a Riesling wine from the Mosel Valley in Germany. Now, the Mosel Valley is very, very cool in winemaking terms. In fact, the wines are grown on steep slate slopes, and only when they're absolutely angled towards the sun are they warm enough to ripen grapes at all. So what I'm looking for in this wine is wonderful, cool flavors. Let's see what I get. Well, the color is very, very pale. A very, very almost, it's a white-green kind of paleness. It's very attractive and very refreshing looking. Immediately green flavors, almost like lime juice. And there's a dryness there which reminds me, I have to say, it reminds me of the slate terraces which the wine comes from. That acidity is very important in this wine. It's like lime juice splashed on the wine. But the lovely thing about this wine is you get that slate dryness coming up the edge of the wine. And just at the end, it seems to soften out into honey. Beautifully made wine. This is a Riesling wine from the Coonawarra area of Australia. Now, the Riesling wine likes a cool climate. Coonawarra is fairly cool, but only in Australian terms. And remember, Australia is a fairly hot country. So I want to get the nice refreshing Riesling character, but I'm expecting that it may be a little rounder and a little fatter than an example, for instance, from the Mosel Valley in Germany. Well, the colour is nice and green, but a little bit fuller than I might otherwise expect. The smell, I get the acidity on the smell. There's quite a strong, rather lime juice kind of acidity, but there is a sort of ripeness coming through as well on the wine. The acidity's still there. But with the acidity, there's rather peachy, warm, ripe, peachy fruit there. Even a little bit of fatness in the wine. And strangely, a sort of gasoline-y kind of quality running through at the end of the wine. Now, don't worry about that. Riesling often gets it. And this is quite a good example. This is a Sancerre. It's made from the Sauvignon Blanc grape in the Loire Valley in France. Now, as soon as I think of the Sauvignon Blanc, I want snappy, tangy flavors. But in France, often the soil and the microclimate also have a strong effect on the flavor of the wine. Let's see if they do here. Well, we certainly get the Sauvignon color. It's nice and pale. Again, a green tinge coming into the wine. Nice, pale, green-looking wine. It doesn't have a rush of strong green fruit flavors. What it does instead is have a rather cold, chalky quality. There's a slight coffee bean kind of smell. And in fact, this wine is grown on flint soil. That's relatively rare, and I feel as though I can smell it in the wine. The wine is very dry. It's very full in the mouth, though. And I don't get anything piercing and sharp. I get more of a rather chalk earth kind of quality. Maybe that flint thing coming in as well. The coffee beans, I don't get them so much on the palate as I did when I smelt the wine, but instead I get a honeyed roundness coming into the wine. It's very nice, very traditional Loire Valley wine. This is a Sauvignon Blanc wine from the Marlborough region in the South Island of New Zealand. Now, in a remarkably short time, New Zealand has become recognised as the world leader for Sauvignon Blanc wines. And the reason is simple. The wines are so wonderfully, marvellously aggressive. They're love 'em or hate 'em wines. I love 'em, but if they're a bit too much for you, don't worry. Now, I look at the colour, and it's positively unthreatening. A nice, pale, green colour. Looks fine to me. Then I smell it. That's more like it. What have we got? We've got asparagus. I mean it, we have got asparagus there. We've got gooseberries. You know what gooseberry jam is like? That sort of curious mixture of aggression, tartness, but some sugar too. You've got that. I tell you what you've also got. You've got canned peas. Okay, we've got cut grass, we've got green apples, lemon, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in there. I'll try and get the courage together to taste it. The acidity runs up in my mouth, but it fills my mouth with all these green flavours. The apple and the lemon and the lime are really coming through now. And right at the end of it, it's not aggressive, it's not harsh, it's not raw. It's filling my mouth. It's very, very nice, unusual wine. This wine is a Chablis. It's made from the Chardonnay grape, grown in the north of the Burgundy region in France. Now, the name Chablis has been quite unfairly borrowed by wines all around the world, but there's only one true Chablis, and that comes from a small area just south of Paris. It's a cool area, but the Chardonnay just manages to creep to ripeness on the particular limestone clays of the region. Now, this coolness is very important because what Chablis has done is make a virtue out of its lack of fruit, make a virtue out of its lack of richness. Now, let's look at this colour. It's very pale. It's very pale, in fact. It's green, green-white almost. And it smells lean. It smells austere. That's what the classic Chablis flavour is. Yeah, it's lemony. It's sort of chalky. And that's actually what I should expect. I don't want rich, round, apricot-y kind of flavours, tropical fruit flavours, or even oak flavours. I can find those elsewhere. What I need from classical Chablis is something austere, something lean. But luckily this one's been well made and has just got a soft, creamy quality around the edge, which makes it very attractive, but very traditional. This wine is a Chardonnay from Santa Barbara County in California. Now, Santa Barbara is way south of San Francisco and is a wine-growing area which has made a tremendous reputation for itself because of the powerful flavour of the fruit grown there. Well, certainly I look at this colour, and that's a full golden colour. It's a positively rich-looking colour, and that's the kind of flavour I'm going to expect in the mouth. Oh yes, I mean this is very, very rich wine. Tropical fruit kind of smell immediately, a rich, almost peachy, apricot-y, rather figgy kind of smell. And there's oak there as well. They've obviously used oak barrels to mature this wine. The wine really fills my mouth. You certainly get that tropical fruit quality in it, and it also fills and fattens out into a syrupy richness in the mouth, but it's very nicely made. The acidity holds it fresh right the way through. This one's a red Burgundy from France. It comes from the village of Volnay in the Côte de Beaune, and it uses the Pinot Noir grape. Burgundy is famous for elegance. It's famous for delicacy. One doesn't go to Burgundy for strong, powerful flavours. One goes for finesse. Burgundy is a cool area, and the Pinot Noir grape is an extremely tricky grape to grow. But Volnay is particularly famous for delicate wines, and I hope that's what we're going to have here. The colour is beautiful. It's quite a new colour, and it's quite deep, and that's because the wine comes from an extremely good vintage. Fruit perfume straight away, a lovely cherry, plums, black plums kind of sweetness. And there's definitely a rather toasty quality because the man who made this has used oak barrels to age his wine. No tannins, no aggression. It's all gentleness. It flows over your palate. This is just what Burgundy is supposed to be all about. Good Burgundy is very difficult to find, but this is a lovely example. This wine is a Pinot Noir from the Carneros area of California. Carneros is just north of San Francisco and is famous for being remarkably cool in a hot state like California. That's important because the Pinot Noir grape likes cool conditions. The Pinot Noir is at its most famous in Burgundy in France, and that's a cool wine area. Well, the colour of this wine is a beautiful, fresh cherry red. It looks very, very inviting. Beautiful cherry smell and a plum smell, but something else as well. A sort of orange blossom kind of perfume coming on, which is absolutely delicious. You want the Pinot Noir to give you fruit, you want the Pinot Noir to give you perfume and delicacy, and that's just what you get here. A lovely cherry fruit to it. The orange blossom is there. There's something slightly like kid love, a perfume like kid love. It's unusual, it's individual, it's absolutely delicious, and shows that it's not just Burgundy and France that can make good Pinot Noir. This is a red wine from the Bordeaux region in France. It comes from the Medoc and is based on the Cabernet Sauvignon grape, blended in with a little Merlot and Cabernet Franc. Bordeaux is probably the greatest red wine area of the world, and certainly for 200 years or more has been making exemplary red wines, which winemakers all around the globe have tried to emulate. The thing about a Bordeaux wine is restraint. It's a certain reserve, but a quiet power which allows the wine to age and age and age, unlike any other red wines. Now this one here has got a nice deep colour. It's about 4 years old from a good vintage, and it already looks as though it's going to be quite a deep, powerful mouthful. Yes, there's lots of smell there, but it's not like tasting a sort of New World Cabernet where you could immediately see fruit flavours. Everything's rather more reserved here. There's a little bit of blackcurrant, a little bit of black cherry probably, but there's an earthiness there, which is exactly what there ought to be. This has been grown on gravel soils, and the gravel soils leave a slight earthy quality in the flavour of the wine. The first thing one gets here, tannin. Tannin is what the Cabernet Sauvignon grape has bundles of, and tannin allows you to age the wine over 10 or 15 years. But there is fruit there because the fruit is ripe. It's quietly blackcurrant, quietly black cherry. The earthiness comes through again, and I also get a slight softening at the edge, and that's because they've used new oak barrels just to soften and age the wine. This wine's a Cabernet Sauvignon from the Napa Valley in California. Cabernet Sauvignon is the great grape of Bordeaux in France, but California nowadays makes many of the finest Cabernet Sauvignons in the world. California in general is a warm climate, so what we're looking for here is a wine with a deep colour, with a big structure, and with intense fruit flavours. Let's see whether we get it. Well, certainly that's a lovely deep colour. It's quite mature, the wine is 6 years old, and it's really holding its colour well. And it certainly has developed a beautiful bouquet. The first thing that comes out of the glass is mint. Now, mint's quite rare in Cabernet Sauvignon, but it's absolutely delicious when you get it. And right behind the mint, I get black cherry, nice, sweet, juicy black cherries, and black currants as well. That's very good. I have got tannin in the mouth. That's absolutely fine. I want some tannin with Cabernet Sauvignon. But with the tannin, I get a sweet black currant and black cherry fruit, something like black olives, which is fascinating, coming around the edge as well. The mint is still there, and also at the end, there's this spicy, gentle softness from new oak barrels. Very nice Cabernet Sauvignon. This wine is a Crozes Hermitage. It comes from the northern part of the Rhone Valley in France, and it uses the Syrah grape. That's also called Shiraz in other parts of the world. This Syrah grape is a wonderful variety for two reasons. It can age as long as you want it to age, as long as any Bordeaux can possibly age, but at the same time it's very accessible when it's young because it's packed full of fruit. Now this one here you can see is a nice dark colour, just beginning to fade slightly at the edges there. It's about 4 years old, that's what I'd expect. So let's have a smell of this. Oh yes. Immediately, what you want from the Syrah. Tons and tons of fruit bursting out of the glass. Raspberries, blackberries, even loganberries coming out there. And there's something else as well. It's a richness like cream and chocolate and a sort of streak of smokiness. And that's a very good pointer for Syrah, that smoky streak. Yeah, this is smashing. All that fruit's still there. It's really strong blackcurrant, blackberry, raspberry, loganberry, all that spectrum of flavours. You have got the cream and the chocolate, and you definitely have that smoky quality, but it isn't too tannic in the mouth. It's basically fruit and smoke all the way. This wine is a Shiraz from the Barossa Valley in South Australia. Now the Shiraz is the grape variety and it's also known as the Syrah in many other countries, particularly in France. The lovely thing about the Shiraz or the Syrah grape is it's got a tremendous ability to age and at the same time it's approachable when it's very, very young. Now South Australia and the Barossa Valley in particular have got loads of Shiraz vines up to 100 years old. This one is made from vines which are 70 years old, and so I expect a great deal of colour, I expect a great deal of flavour, and I expect a lot of complexity. Let's see what I get. Well, firstly, that colour. I mean, that is dark, dark red. It's a really deep, purpley kind of red. I can see no age at all in that wine, and I really can see concentration running right to the core of the wine. So I'm expecting tons and tons of smell and tons of flavour. Tons and tons of smells, about right. Gosh, I mean, all the kind of red and black fruits you can think of bursting out of that glass. Blackberry, blackcurrant, and loganberries, and dark sweet plums are all in there. But there's much, much more. There's a sort of a minty kind of smell, and there's a vanilla kind of smell as well. That vanilla will, by the way, come from the oak barrels, American oak barrels, which the wine has been aged in before being bottled. I think it's about time I had a taste of this. This is the business. Wow. I mean, the flavour is so intense in your mouth. There is a bit of tan in there, bitterness, but it almost seems soft in some way. And then you get all this marvellous fruit coming out. The blackberry and the blackcurrant bursting up in the glass. That sort of dark plum thing. Chocolate, definitely chocolate, but it's black chocolate rather than white sort of milky chocolate. There's a licorice sort of bitterness in the wine, and then right the way through it comes this gorgeous mint perfume and this vanilla wrapping around the fruit. This is majestic stuff. This wine is a Recioto di Soave. That's a rare sweet wine from the Veneto region of northeast Italy. Now, most of the great sweet wines of the world, like Sauterne, are made from grapes affected with botrytis or noble rot, and that intensifies the sugar in the grapes. This wine is made by a different method. The grapes are picked, but then they're taken indoors and they're dried so that the grapes shrivel, and that's how they intensify the sugar. The colour of this is quite fresh. It's got a nice gold colour, but there's a good green hue around the edge as well. So I'm expecting quite a fresh kind of smell. Well, it's fresh. It's fresh like fresh baked bread. There's a sort of bread yeast quality. There's also a dried apple kind of smell. That's the fruit in it. The kind of dried apple you get in breakfast cereal. It's much, much sweeter on the palate than it seemed to be when I smelt it. The dried apple is still there, but there's dried apricots in there as well. The bread yeast is also still there, but we do, thank goodness, get a round, fat feel to the wine, a syrupy, honeyed quality as well, which makes it unusual, but good. This wine's a Sauterne, a sweet wine from the Bordeaux region in France. In good years, and this is a very good year, noble rot or botrytis affects the vineyards, and this is a fungus which shrivels the grapes and intensifies the sugar in the grapes. And that's what allows you to make a very, very sweet wine. Now, I'm expecting a lot of richness here, and immediately the colour gives me the impression I'm going to get it. It's a full, round, golden colour. It's got a deep golden hue to it. That smell is a very rich smell. It immediately comes up at me with pineapple and barley sugar kind of smells. And there's a spice there as well, something like cinnamon or cloves and a vanilla quality. And all of that's coming from the mixture of rich, botrytis-affected sweet grapes and new oak barrels, which the wine has been matured in. That's lovely. It is sweet. That pineapple really does come up in the wine. The barley sugar and almost a butterscotchy quality coming through as well. The spice is still there. There's a sort of acidity, a rather volatile acidity, like as though you'd bruised a very, very ripe peach. And that's also a thing you often get in botrytis-affected wines. This is a lovely, rich wine now, and you could age it for 10 or 20 years if you wanted to. This one is a Fino Sherry, a dry, fortified wine from Andalusia in southern Spain. It's just about the driest and lightest of all fortified wines, and it should have an appetizing, palate-tingling kind of quality, which explains why it's very popular as an aperitif wine to be drunk before people eat. Well, the colour is very pale, extremely pale. Again, this very green tint on a very, very pale wine. The smell... Well, when you're dealing with dry sherries or sherries of any kind, you're not dealing with mainstream smells or flavours. Now, if you want to hear these, what this reminds me of is freshly dug earth. It reminds me of the roots of trees freshly exposed. It reminds me, oh yes, of bread yeast. Bread yeast, very fresh bread yeast, which actually is very important because, of course, the yeasty quality I'm getting on this comes from the way it is made. The wine actually is made with a layer of yeast over the top of the tank all the time it is maturing, which keeps the wine fresh and at the same time gives that bready, yeasty quality to the wine. That's very nice. The qualities, the strange flavours, soften down slightly in the wine. Funnily enough, there's a little bit of acidity now rising in the wine, which is quite attractive and quite refreshing. But that yeasty quality and that curious dry earth quality runs right the way through the wine. This wine is vintage port, a sweet, fortified wine from the Douro Valley in Portugal. It's one of the most powerful and one of the most long-lived of all fortified wines. Now, the grapes are grown under torrid conditions on terraces on the steep slopes on the banks of the river. And the torrid conditions bring tremendous ripeness into the fruit. That ripeness, that intensity of fruit runs right the way through the wine. Look at this colour here. It's still dark. It's still purpley almost. It hardly shows any maturity at all. Deep down in there's a sort of mulberry red, but it's coiled round with purple youth still. That's 11 years old and it's hardly started. That's rich, but the first thing I get is a sort of whiff of alcohol. The heat, the strength of the alcohol immediately going up my nostrils, because the wine is strong, but the sweetness is of mulberries, and the sweetness is almost of the grapes themselves still boiling and fermenting in the vat. It's that heady. very sweet, but it's very strong. It's really warming my throat. And that sweetness, it is rather like the grapes themselves. And then you get a richness of blackberries and black plums coming into the wine. There's a streak of herbs on the side of the wine, like thyme, like rosemary, and a peppery quality too. And right at the finish, suddenly you get a rather spicy, kitchen spice kind of quality. But all the way through, you know it's strong alcoholic wine because I can feel my throat really warming. Vineyard conditions and management will yield a crop of grapes with a given set of characteristics: tannin, sugar, acidity, and so on. But the technical options available to the modern winemaker in the winery are tremendous, and what he or she decides to do to draw out the full flavour of the grapes will have a dramatic effect on the final wine in terms of character and style. This is where it all starts. All the skills of your winemaker will count for nothing if the quality of the raw material isn't up to scratch. So the first job is to grow your grapes. Where the vineyard is and how it is managed are fundamental to the character and quality of your wine. The label on a bottle of wine is the first clue to what it is and what it tastes like. Some labels are simple and obvious, some are really quite complicated. Just looking at the labels we've chosen to analyse will give you a great deal of valuable wine information. The grape variety is the most important factor in the taste of a wine. There are hundreds of different grape varieties and they all taste different. But in this section, we give you a key to understanding the 12 top grape varieties in the world. How they grow, where they grow, and what they taste like. Our wine selector will allow you to make an infinite number of lists for all kinds of purposes and occasions. But we thought it would be fun to suggest a few lists to you to tempt you to try some different styles, different countries. But think of our lists as guided tours. You follow them when you want to, and you sneak off and do your own thing when you don't. Wine comes in many different flavors and styles. We define every wine by style. In this section, we explain what those styles are. The Wine Selector allows you to search for a wine by style. Try it out. You may be surprised at how many interesting paths it opens up for you. Wine can be drunk with a lot of pleasure as an aperitif, but the truly great wine experiences usually happen at mealtimes and in congenial company. People derive great pleasure from choosing wines to drink with their friends over dinner or for some special celebration. We have a large database of food and wine combinations for you to try, but they're not dogmatic. They're just there to lead you forward to wonderful combinations you find out for yourself. Some wines improve with keeping and some don't, and frankly it's a bit of a nightmare working out which is which. So many factors come into play, the grower, the vintage, the grape variety. However, there are some rules of thumb, and here they are. When I say cellar, I don't mean a cavern under some baronial mansion. I mean, how many of us have one of those nowadays? Certainly not me. No, what I mean by cellar is That collection of wines stored in your own home, or stored for you by a wine club or a wine merchant, which allows you to move on from that hand-to-mouth system of picking up a bottle of wine for dinner on the way home from work, to a point when you're a bit more in control. And it doesn't matter where you store those wines, in the broom closet, under the stairs, just so long as you follow a few simple guidelines. Wine has a rich and remarkable history which is still very much in the making. I hope our fascinating facts will show you just how wonderful the world of wine is. You need know nothing more than the name on the bottle, or the grape variety, or the winery, or possibly just the region, or even the country, and the chances are you'll easily be able to track down the wine you're looking for in our comprehensive encyclopedia.